Hey, what's up, guys? Bales. I am at DraftKings and going to do a lineup review of actually four lineups from DraftKings and FanDuel, my highest and lowest scoring on each site. Just walk you through what I was thinking. And I had originally planned to do these every week, but we just got very busy at FantasyLabs with NBA and rolled out a whole bunch of new stuff. But with NBA starting tomorrow night, we're pretty much wrapping up a lot of that stuff, and still busy, but was able to take some time to do this and hope to do these every week moving forward. So top lineup on DK was in the Wildcat, which is it was a 333. I think it was just over 5,000 teams, and top lineup finished fourth, scored 219.52. I had a pretty good shot here at the end, and then I got passed, I think, by some blunt lineups and Julio, and I didn't have too much blunt exposure, actually. I did have a lot of Julio, and I had a ton of AJ Green, and neither one was in this particular lineup, so I'm not sure exactly how it finished this high. I think every other lineup within maybe like 10 points of me or something had AJ, and I had a ton of AJ, just not in this one. And I think without that Hail Mary, I actually would have won this for 250K. I got fourth for 30,000. I got past. Didn't really have a shot at the end at first or second, but I was in third until I think it was an overtime catch from Julio, or maybe at the end of the fourth quarter where I got past. So that's a 20K swing. It shows you just the variance in tournaments. I mean, without an AJ Green Hail Mary, potentially $220,000 difference, but that's sort of the way it goes in tournaments. But yeah, so I went with a double stack here: Luck, T.Y. Hilton, Doyle. I didn't like Doyle in the beginning of the week, and then got on him more. I believe he played like 66 snaps or something last week after Dwayne Allen went down, and so I figured it was a safe bet he was going to get more targets, and he was, I think, min priced at 2,500. He was just unbelievably cheap, and I have been double stacking offenses I think are really explosive, and obviously Luck can sort of go off at any time. So I went Luck, Hilton, Doyle there. Hilton at only 10.6 and Luck at 2.1. Were relatively low owned, definitely Luck. Around that, I had a lot of high ownership guys, and that's something that I did a lot this week, actually. I think sometimes people can fall into the trap that thinking that being contrarian means always using low owned players or always foregoing value, or that using game theory means fading chalk, and I don't think that is the case for two reasons. One is that the volatility of your lineup and how much upside it has is very holistic. It's the entire lineup works in conjunction. Together, the players feed off of one another, not only in terms of the actual correlations with things like stacking, but also just the way that you structure ownership. And that's something that I've been doing more this year than ever before, which is good, but it's using some of those high-owned guys who are in obvious value spots, not fading a Spencer Ware, for example, who's just very clearly underpriced, not fading Jacquizz, who I had a lot of, just not in this lineup, not fading even a Mike Evans, who's a pretty volatile guy, but I thought in a really great position there. Same thing with DeMarco, who you see at 42.4%. So doing that, but then getting some guys who I really like, who I know are going to be low owned in there. And in this case, that was Jeremy Hill, and he was the big player. He got hurt in the fourth quarter. That would have been, I think he had only 9 carries. So I would have had a much better shot at maybe winning, but certainly getting second or third here. But that's something that I've been doing more, is going sort of high low with ownership, as opposed to being in the middle where you are not getting the obvious value that's easy to spot, and then also not really being anti-fragile in terms of, having a guy at 7% who goes off is much different than having a Jeremy Hill at 2% or some of those guys who are in that 1 to 2% range who you like. And I think that there are still those guys, you can still get them. So that was pretty much what I did here. There was correlation play, obviously, with the stack, and then I also had DeMarco on the opposite side of that. So if the Titans were to get up, Colts would have to throw to come back, and I also thought that there was some chance that the game turned into a shootout, which it did a bit, but that was the idea there. And then the Bengals and Jeremy Hill, obviously, I like to pair. I think lots of people pair a running back with a defense, but it depends on the running back. Jeremy Hill, though, is a guy that I thought he's probably more correlated to the, and actually we can probably look at this on FantasyLabs, more correlated to the Bengals defense. This is my model from a few weeks ago, so it doesn't have accurate. Okay, so he's positive correlation, 0.13 to the Bengals defense, but is it because he's not really, he can catch the ball, but they use Gio more in that role. So certain guys, I'm thinking like Blunt, maybe Gurley, some guys like that are probably more correlated to their defensive output than a guy like Gio or pass catching backs like that who can still produce later in the game. David Johnson being another who's probably more independent of game flow than a guy like Jeremy Hill. So that was the top lineup. I had 7 in here. I've been entering more into the 300, but I did a lot more at lower stakes. I almost never mass enter, almost never have more than 15 to 20 lineups on a site, and this week I wanted to play more at lower stakes, and part of that was because of the new tools that we have at FantasyLabs that we launched, the Player Models 2.0, that allows me to pick players, just say who I like, and then generate lineups, and now I can be more confident that they're really good lineups. So you can pick your player pool. So in terms of diversifying, it can be as much or as little as you want. And then in something like the Millionaire Maker, it's really valuable to have a unique lineup. If you have a duplicate lineup, I would say it probably can't even be profitable long term. You just will never win like that. So we have a max salary cap thing, so you can just set that at 99.9%. You can go even higher if you want. Typically don't want to tighten in a flex and something like that, and then generate lineups. I have 9, generate I'm up to 100 lineups. And before, if I did this, I would have to hand pick, okay, I want this one, I don't want this one. But we have been able to create some better lineups with this player pool feature, and also just improving the logic of the multi-lineup tool in general. Yeah, I was able to give that a test run. And then the other thing is that's new that we actually just launched over the weekend is min and max exposure, which is really helpful. So you can say I want Aaron Rodgers between 20 and 40% of lineups, and I want Roethlisberger in at least 20, and I want Andy Dalton in no more than 15, but at least in 1. So then we can generate based on that, and we should get something close to that window for each player. And so we had Roethlisberger we wanted him in at least 20. He's in 27. We wanted Dalton in 5 to 15. He's in 11. And maybe I didn't click properly on Rodgers between 20 and 40, and he's in 26. So that's worked really well, better than I thought it would, and that's what I used this past week to help manage those and get the lineups that I wanted to generate. And yeah, so that was my top lineup. I cashed 4 of 7. Really only one other one was in the top. A few were close to the bubble and just got in. Worst one was, and you'll see that the best and worst lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel were very similar. So I didn't have a huge amount of Jags. Luckily, I did have more Hearns than Allen Robinson, but both were awful. Obviously, Marquise Lee was their top receiver. Um, Bortles was horrendous, but I went another double stack: Bortles, Hearns, Robinson, and I'll do this on certain offenses. Obviously, I want them to have upside, which I think the Jags do, obviously. But I also want to be pretty confident that the ball is going to go to certain players. So I do this with the Jets a lot, who almost exclusively throw outside to those guys. When Decker wasn't injured, Decker and Marshall, so I'd double stack that. As opposed to some other offenses where they might spread the ball around a bit more. You're just not really sure who's going to be getting the targets, or maybe there's just not enough upside. So that was the idea there. I have a running back in the flex in both of these. I think that happened more just because of some of the value this week. That's not something I normally do. I'd say I normally have a running back in the flex in maybe 15 or 20% of lineups overall. Tournament lineups in cash, I almost always have a running back in there. So you can see this lineup had Quiz and Gordon, who both did very, very well. So, and DeMarco. So if you take that out, it was just horrendous. But you can see same type of strategy where there's a few low-owned guys, nothing super low, but Kelsey at 4.4, who I actually really liked a lot, and he matched his ownership with his point total, which isn't good if you're low-owned. Bills, obviously just didn't get anything going there. Golden Tate I liked quite a bit, but did not think he'd be at 22.8. That was much higher than I thought. And Jacquizz was a similar thought to Spencer Ware. I had them rated about evenly, and I had about even exposure to those two players, where I really wasn't going to fade them. I knew they'd be in a lot. Just thinking around 35%, and Quiz was 44, Ware was 46, so about the same. But I liked both quite a bit. So similar philosophy here, and this one just didn't work out. So FanDuel, this is the Sunday Million. Top lineup finished 23rd out of 70,000, and worst lineup finished almost last. I think within 100 spots maybe of being, I guess it was 1,000 spots of being last. So very similar to DraftKings, where at the top one, Luck, Ware, DeMarco, Mike Evans, Doyle, they were all the same. This one did have AJ Green. I had a lot of AJ Green. He ended up hurting me ultimately because of that fourth place lineup and not having him, but also had some lineups that did well because of him, obviously. But again, here there is no double stack in either of these in situations where I could have and didn't on DK. That was more just not random, but I don't have the same stack all the time if I enter a bunch of lineups. So I didn't have Luck, Hilton, and Doyle in every single Luck. I had them in the majority, but some were Luck, Hilton, some were just Luck and Doyle. In hindsight, probably should have had Hilton. I actually don't know that I would have scored more points because it would have needed more salary and to take out either Evans or AJ Green here. But I explained the philosophy on most of these guys. Luck, Michael Thomas, Jets D being the very low owned ones, Lambo, sort of Luck, I guess, picking a kicker, indoors, high scoring game. I thought he'd be higher than 6%. I'm pretty much just mixing up my kickers, and then actually a lot of times avoiding domes in tournaments, because the ownership, I did some research in the offseason, the ownership is really, really high, inflated in domes, and lower than it should be if kickers just outside in good weather. So Michael Thomas was, I guess, the player here who I was highest on, or I guess it would be Luck and Michael Thomas highest on relative to the field, and the rest was mostly chalk. The worst lineup, again, Bortles to Hearns. I liked Hearns more than more than Allen Robinson, like I said. See DeMarco again, Kelsey again in this one. Brandon Marshall, luckily I got off of late. Jimmy Smith was ruled active pretty late, and I had Marshall in a whole lot in anticipation of maybe him not playing, and got off of Marshall for the most part late. And some other things, actually, I was actually scrambling and got my lineups in with like under a minute left. I exported them from FantasyLabs and put them into DK where I had more or less dummy lineups. So yeah, that was good. And that was the thinking here again, the high-low chalk with DeMarco. This one doesn't have as much of that, the super chalk like AJ Green, Mike Evans, Julio. But then I knew Mark Ingram would be really low. I don't really know what to think about Mark Ingram. I think I'm going to have to move off of him, but every week he keeps coming out really high in he's coming out pretty good in terms of value for me. Not outstanding, but created a bunch of tournament trends to predict ownership and basically how much players will help me if they do well. And he keeps coming out really high in that and keeps not doing anything. So probably he'll be a pivotal player for me to assess moving forward, just because he's probably cost me more money this year than any other player. But yeah, that is the thinking on those 4 lineups. Definitely go to FantasyLabs this week and play around with the new player pool and stuff, because it just became a whole lot easier to create really good lineups really quickly. And the min and max exposure, which we actually haven't even really announced and talked about, I think is potentially the coolest thing here. Just liking players who you want. Those are the only players that go into lineups, saying I want at least this amount, but no more than this amount. And you can set a good amount of them, and we come up with lineups pretty quickly. So they're getting very, very close to lineups that I think are as good as I could generate by hand. In addition with adding that better logic to the lineup builder. So yeah, thanks for watching, and good luck next week.